Well, good morning. My name is Patrick Woodcock. I'm the president and CEO of the Maine State Chamber of Commerce. Really appreciate all the reporters joining us today as we wanted to provide a little bit of a business roundtable on an issue that will be discussed in the Maine legislature this session and is one of the top priorities of the Maine State Chamber of Commerce. As many of you all know, the history of PFAS legislation in Maine really originates with our farms, where there was discovery of PFAS contamination. The Maine legislature enacted a law prohibiting that disposal of sludge, and the Maine Chamber fully supports that law. In addition, Maine has been at the forefront in crafting PFAS legislation that a lot of states have reflected upon, and ultimately, a lot of the states have moved in a different direction. We do think that the Maine state law must be amended this session in a manner that allows businesses to comply. In sum, this statute is unworkable for our Maine businesses. Not only do we need to make the amendments to comply with it, but we need to also recognize that PFAS chemicals are critical in a lot of functions in a specialized business. The current law effectively applies an industrial process and prohibition to the most sophisticated companies in aviation, in defense contracting, and in marine applications, as you'll hear today. There are three aspects that the Maine Chamber of Commerce is seeking changes. First, there is a requirement to notify for the DEP the use of PFAS by January 1, 2025. Believe that that currently is unworkable. Frank, just simply, Maine businesses cannot provide the level of detail that the law requires. Secondly, we should build on some of the work of other states and prohibit PFAS where we know that there are substitutes and reduce the circulation of PFAS when there can be alternatives. And third, we should write in and build on the work that the legislature previously did by expanding exemptions for key industries that we know can be used safely. That includes companies that are providing military specifications for contracts with the Department of Defense. It also applies to some of the semiconductor industries, looking at medical applications, aviation, and also for our vehicles and marine vessels. Quite simply, and almost universally in the legislature, there is a recognition now that this statute needs to be changed to both start eliminating additional PFAS from the environment, but protecting and utilizing PFAS when we know that it can be safely done. I'm very pleased to introduce a number of businesses with us today who will give a perspective of how this legislation, the current statute, would affect their business. I'm going to turn to Chris Kilgore with CL Aviation First, then Stacy Kiefer with Maine Marine Trades Association, Jeff Bauer with IDEX, and I would note that Chris has to leave, so we pause for if there are any questions for him for the other businesses.
Sorry, it was breaking up there. Was that me?
Broke up for me too.
Yeah, same.
Yeah. So what do you need us to do now?
Just provide a on how he keeps legislation to affect this.
That's still breaking up. Maybe, I don't know, try turning off your camera if that helps.
Try that, Patrick.
Can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
That's better.
Sorry. No, to jump in.
Well, I tell you what we'll do. I'll introduce my business, and I think he was saying how it affects my business, this new law. So I'll go with that, and if we need to do something different, we can do that. So yeah, my name's Chris Coe. I'm the owner of C&L Aerospace and C&L Aviation Services based at the Bangor Airport. We sell and distribute parts all around the world, and we also repair aircraft, paint aircraft, do interiors, fix components, that sort of thing. And so as we see it, and as we understand this very broad law, I should add that last year we did about 130 million in revenue. 99% of that was coming from out of Maine. We have very few customers in Maine, and we have about 200 employees in Bangor. So when we deal with aircraft, we probably have a couple of 100,000 different parts that we stock in our warehouse here that we sell. Each of those parts are sort of component parts that are made up of a lot of thousands of individual parts on top of that. So I don't actually have a good count of how many different parts we would have that would need to be tested. Needless to say that it would be in the millions. When we work on aircraft, an aircraft may have anywhere from 10 to 30 million individual parts, and any one of those parts may need to be replaced at any time when an aircraft comes in the hangar to be repaired. So in my mind, testing maybe, 10 million parts is virtually impossible. One, the capacity for testing is not there. Two, the cost of testing would be prohibitive. And the other thing is that everything that we supply for aircraft, everything that we install on an aircraft is authorized by the FAA or another equivalent entity in other countries. We don't have a say as to what parts go on. We can't substitute parts. It's all laid out and authorized by the FAA. So we have no option. We have to put those parts on. And when we're talking about suppliers of those parts, we're talking about Boeing, Airbus, Honeywell, Rockwell Collins. And what we buy off them, even though we feel it's a big number, is just minuscule compared to their overall presence in the market. And so they have no interest in helping us to test their parts. So the very broad nature of this legislation just really makes it impossible for us to operate here if it came into law that way. I certainly support the idea of reducing PFAS in the environment and making sure it's not in food and that sort of thing. But I think it needs to be a stepped approach rather than this broad legislation that we have now.
Thank you, Chris. Can you all hear me?
Yes.
Okay, sorry, I changed locations, and hopefully that's better. Thanks for bearing with me. Let me know, Jen, do you think we should turn to Stacy now, or should I give an additional overview?
Well, I think that a lot was missed in the last couple of minutes of what you were saying before you introduced Chris. I'm not sure if there would be relevant for you to repeat that for reporters.
The only aspect that we have had many discussions with those in the legislature, stakeholders, and there is universal recognition that this statute needs to change. Maine can be a leader on reducing PFAS in our environment, but we also need to make this workable for Maine businesses. Quite simply, the notification section of the law is unable to be complied with at the level of specificity that the statute requires. That effectively creates a ban for all products, irrespective of whether it's an industrial application or the most sophisticated manufacturing process on the planet. We need to revise the law so it works for Maine businesses and also builds on other states' work where we can eliminate PFAS from products that we know that there are substitutes in existence today. I did want to just say that we have a an application of our statute that is applicable irrespective of the industry. So what we are really seeking with the Maine legislature and have had some productive conversations is addressing the notification that takes effect in 2025, building on other states and prohibiting PFAS in products that we know that there are substitutes, and then also applying some exemptions and building on the work of the Maine legislature by clearly allowing our aviation industries, our defense-related industries, medical and veterinarian, that we know that we can utilize PFAS in a appropriate and safe manner. I did want to pause there and thank you for bearing with me. Chris Kilgore does need to leave, and I wanted to see if there were questions from any of the reporters for Chris. If not, then we can move to Stacy Kiefer. Thank you, Chris.
All right, I can stay for another 10 minutes, so I'll stay on.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you all for being here. First, I just want to say thanks to the Chamber for pulling this together, and thank you to the media for helping people understand the immense impact of this legislation on businesses. And I just want to say that it's hard to be a business or representing multiple businesses like the Maine Marine Trades Association does and stick your neck out about PFAS. It's not a place you want to put your name, right? Because now in the press, people might associate IDEX and CNL Aviation and boat building with PFAS. But in reality, there's probably PFAS in so many different manufacturing aspects in our state. But we're the ones willing to step up and put our names out there a little bit. So I just want to frame that because I'm going to give you some stats from one of our boat builders who wish to remain anonymous just for that reason. But I'll also say that Maine Marine Trades Association has always tried to be very proactive and collaborative with Maine DEP. We try to help them create useful and meaningful rules and then bring those and educate our businesses on how to be in compliance. But on this one, it's feeling a bit impossible. When the legislation was first passed, the first thing I did was reach out to the Small Business Ombudsman and say, help, we need some training. I have no idea how to help our members on this. And they said, we don't have any training on this. We don't have anything we can teach them on how to report and what to report and how to test. So that was a first challenge for us. And then as we got into this topic more, we realized, this to be an effective law, this requires absolute global cooperation in a global economy and global manufacturing, and where we're sourcing things from so many different countries. Even if it was just all our parts were sourced in the United States, that could be challenging in itself. But the global economy just makes this even more difficult. As Chris said, my suppliers, the amount that Maine is using in our manufacturing is less than 1% of some of these businesses' global customer base. They're not going to be bothered with an honors reporting just to help us out. It's such a fraction of their business. So I'll give you some stats just to help understand a little bit on how exponential this is for one of our businesses, a business that employs 121 people full-time with benefits. And it's a boat builder who considers themselves probably the most like a production boat builder, where things would be more predictable and maybe easier to report. But in reality, they build about 40 vessels a year, and they range in retail price from $600,000 to $1.1 million. And in recent years, they've built 5 different models of vessels and currently offer 8 different engine models. So each time there's a little bit of a change, the report changes. So even though there's semi-production, no 2 boats that come out of that factory are identical. It's almost like building a custom house. You know, it would be reporting on a custom house. How do you do that? So their lead time on their orders are typically anywhere between 1 to 2 years out, depending on the model. And the supply chains typically change between the time of the customer ordering and the time of commissioning that vessel. So currently, they source their components and materials from 186 different vendors and stock over 5,000 unique items at their facility on the manufacturing floor. And they did reach out to 15 of those 186 different vendors this year just to see what would this look like to try to collect this data. And only 2 of those 15 vendors actually responded and said, well, I don't know how we're going to do this because we purchase between those 2 from over 4,000 vendors of their own and have over 110,000 individual SKU or SKU parts numbers. So I just took that data and extrapolated. It's not a, real perfect calculation, but just so the media understands that exponential reporting curve. So for every 2 of these vendors that this boat builder uses, that equals 4,000 suppliers and 110,000 parts. And so for reporting all the components that possibly built in their vessel, they could have to drill back to over 372,000 suppliers and over 10 million parts. So that just is not feasible, even if the testing was affordable. So it's very complex, and I can pause there and just see if there's any questions at this point.
Maybe any clarifying questions for Stacy? Thank you, Stacy.
You're welcome.
Yeah, I had one question. This is Penny from the Press Herald. I'm just wondering, do you have any members that are willing to speak publicly about this?
I don't know. I've had one who was willing to send letters to the legislature. I would have to ask them.
Well, if there's a letter to the legislature, isn't that's a public document?
Sometimes it depends if it was submitted during public hearing or they can submit it after the public hearing, and the committee may still get their letter, but it's not on the legislative documents or roll call on the hearings.
Okay, thank you.
Yep, you're welcome.
This is
Right.
Lori from the Bangor Daily News. Did that boat builder have any suggestions at all about how to taper this down in a meaningful way?
I appreciate that question. Thank you. Well, in general, the Marine Trades appreciate the approach that the chamber's putting forward and let the other states, these giant states like California, they've got dozens of staff people in their state, granted a larger population, but our DEP is trying to roll out a very complex program with 1 to 2 staff people. It's just not feasible. It's very complex just to set up a whole brand new database, let alone manage it and enforce it. So, I think let's look at what we've got. Let's use the PFAS regulation that we've got, right? For is it carpet and fabric or whatever? How is that going? Is that effective yet? Have we even checked on that? Maybe I've missed that in the news, but I think because PFAS are found everywhere from, toilet paper to advanced manufacturing, it probably needs to be managed in smaller pieces if the EPA can't take the lead on this. I know Maine doesn't want to wait for the EPA to take the lead, but where this is such a global topic and will require global cooperation, I feel like EPA and larger states maybe need to take more of a lead, and certainly we can follow once they figure out some of the hurdles to clear.
Thank you.
If I could just reinforce one point that Stacy made. The way that our statute works now is if you are selling a product in Maine, but you source thousands of products from different suppliers, you need to report not only the amount, but also from each component, how much PFAS is added, even if you did not produce that yourself. So it creates this an incredible burden on businesses to identify all of the PFAS from all of these components. You talked about what Chris is going through, but from auto manufacturers to medical equipment, it creates an incredible task. And the answer for a lot of these main businesses is we don't know the exact quantity. And as a result, you cannot comply with the main law that is scheduled to take effect on January 1, 2025. I did want to turn.
Can I say one thing, Patrick, before I leave?
Sure.
Just hearing Stacy, I think it's a worrisome situation when we have business owners that are scared to publicly oppose something like this law because I guess they're worried about repercussions. I'm not sure why. Maybe I'm just silly being here. I don't know. But I think it's a very worrisome situation. I mean, you know, this is America for one thing. As you can hear, I'm not from here, but you know, it's a relatively easy place to do business. I have offices all around the world, and you know, these businesses employ people, which these people spend money in the economy, and this has the potential to decimate the economy in Maine. It's certainly not going to be welcoming for other businesses to move here if laws like this come into play. So I think it's a very, very slippery slope that we're on here, and very worrisome for me. I mean, like I said, pretty much all of my sales outside of the state, I don't need to be in the state. So I can move to the state next door, and then I don't have to worry about this. I have concern for the businesses that their livelihood has to be in the state, and what are they going to do except close down? So it's a very worrisome situation, and I think people need to be educated about the scope of what this is.
And we certainly are saying that we should reduce PFAS in the economy.
Sure.
If you look at what the European Union has doing and with all the resources is look at a risk base. So is this product, is there a propensity that it could add contamination to groundwater, to drinking water? And what is the value? Are there substitutes for it? The way the Maine law works is there is a complete ban in 2030, irrespective of whether there are substitutes, irrespective of whether it's critical to manufacture the product. It really is an outlier of how states and other countries have pursued PFAS regulatory structure. Thank you, Chris. I know you may have to leave, but I did want to turn to Jeff Bauer with IDEX from IDEX's perspective. Jeff?
Thanks, Patrick. As many of you may know, IDEX's global headquarters are here in Maine, where approximately 90% of our worldwide manufacturing and R&D occurs. IDEX manufactures human and animal for pets and livestock, dairy, and water diagnostic products. And these products test for infectious diseases, including those that spread from animals to humans, such as SARS coronavirus 2, diseases that endanger the food supply, such as African swine fever. Our diagnostic solutions help animal producers manage vaccination programs more efficiently and to reduce the use of antibiotics. So we are very concerned about what is in the environment and certainly are looking for reasonable ways to limit the amount of PFAS that is in our community. But these critical diagnostic tests that are used to keep our pets, food, and water safe are also subject to stringent regulatory frameworks around the world. Accordingly, they're not easily changed, and changes to many of our products require approval of regulatory agencies, both in the US and abroad. So the issue that I really wanted to talk about and that we've been hitting on is the notification requirement. The current law requires a notification requirement that is simply unachievable. First, the law calls for disclosure on a vast number of PFAS compounds, and it really creates its own definition of PFAS that is not being adopted by either the EU or the EPA. So that creates challenges for our vendors and our suppliers from around the world who may not be familiar with Maine's rules. But that vast number of PFAS compounds that Maine is looking at likely exceeds a number of more than 15,000 compounds. However, in our search and in the work we've done, and we're very experienced at this, we've identified only 7 laboratories, and none of them in the US, that can perform these tests to detect PFAS compounds on our products. And on average, those 7 laboratories can only test for about 70 out of the 15,000 compounds. This is far fewer than what's in the law. Further, these 7 labs can't test every product that we manufacture, and nor are the tests and the results that they provide always conclusive. Second, and as we've discussed, and some of others have laid out very well, but many of these complex products, such as the circuit boards that are necessary for human and veterinary medical instruments, they're procured through multiple supply sources, and that the information that this requires is not always available. The combination of our inability to test for many of the products and inability to obtain this information from suppliers makes this notification requirement really unworkable. And with that, I'd be happy to kind of throw it over to questions that anybody might have.
There's some questions for Jeff.
Hi, Jeff. This is Vivian Lee from News Center, Maine. Have you been a part of any kind of discussions with lawmakers? Patrick talked about an amendment earlier. Again, this legislation, I believe, is almost 2 or 3 years old, to come up with an amendment that's workable for industry and more realistic. And where do you guys stand on that as far as the amendment?
We actually have had a number of discussions, and right now we are really appreciative of the governor's as well as the commissioner and committee's focus on understanding the complex issues. They all have been engaged in trying to improve the law, and we continue to be hopeful that things continue to move in this direction.
Patrick, could you speak to that, please? Because you talked about that you said the law must be amended to allows, I'm quoting you, that allows businesses to comply. We have a lot of businesses that are being impacted. So where do we stand in this process?
Yes, so specifically the Energy and Natural Resources Committee, which has jurisdiction, has had a number of hearings through this fall and ultimately led to discussions with stakeholders. Really appreciate the leadership from the Department of Environmental Protection's Commissioner and the Mills administration to look at this substantively. We are not seeking a repeal of the law. We are seeking to, one, amend the notification section to make it workable for businesses. We do not think that it is workable and cannot be complied with. Secondly, we are looking at building on some of the other states' work and removing PFAS from the products that we know that there are substitutes. So a number of other states, Minnesota, have passed prohibitions of PFAS in a number of products. We are open to that, but we want to do it in conjunction with other states. And then lastly, we do think that there should be exemptions for industries that are not only critical to the Maine business, but Maine economy, but have oversight of other federal um, uh, departments and regulatory structures. So we are very encouraged that the legislature will move forward with revisions, and we are hopeful that that will happen this session in the Maine legislature.
Yeah, Patrick, this is Kevin Miller with Maine Public Radio. Or maybe this is for anyone who wants to answer. I'm glad you mentioned that you said that you're not interested in repealing the law, because that's one criticism I've heard from some of the others. They said that the chamber has come to the table as a stakeholder, says you want to improve the law, at the same time you've been saying just get rid of it. So if you can just kind of talk about that again. And then if you don't mind, and you may have talked about this a little bit more earlier, but drill down a little bit more on the types of exemptions. I think we're talking about medical, veterinary, would it be automotive, aircraft. Do you have specific examples of the types of things that you think should be exempted from the amendment or
Sure.
from the law?
Yes, and I do think that Maine can be a leader on PFAS regulation. I think we have created a model and a lot of different environmental laws. This we did very quickly. It was during the pandemic session, and upon reflection, I think there really needs to be a more surgical application to where PFAS is actually contributing to pollution in our groundwater and our drinking water supplies. Effectively, we have a application to all industries that is one size fits all. So there are a number of areas that we are looking to have the PFAS ban, which is in statute by 2030, not apply to. For instance, drugs, medical devices, medical equipment. We're looking at items that are under the jurisdiction of the Food and Drug Administration, federal activities under the Federal Aviation Administration. We are looking at making sure that our heat pumps that use refrigerants can continue to be installed in Maine. Looking at contracts that are pursuant to DoD and Homeland Security specifications. We really do think that there needs to be a more targeted approach at the types of consumer products rather than these sophisticated manufacturing applications, Kevin. So we do think that we should retain a prohibition on PFAS, but for the industries that are sophisticated and have regulatory oversight through the federal government, that the Maine statute should not be applicable to.
Would there be, Patrick, and maybe Stacy, you can speak to this, a carve out for marine products or marine vessels as well? Some kind of an exemption. Could you speak to that, Stacy?
Stacy, I can take that, but we are discussing water vessels and also vehicles that are under the jurisdiction of federal motor vehicle safety standards.
And I can add
Because is there a
go ahead.
concern as well? I'm sorry, didn't mean to step on you. Because as we know with the FAA, the AFFF foam, or I just did a story on turnout gear, where that is the national standard for thermal, the 3 layers that the firefighters wear. There is no alternative that's been approved. So is that a concern too, as far as when it comes to making some of these products, as far as what the national standard is, and there is no PFAS-free products available to fit that standard? And you can go ahead, Stacy. Sorry about that.
Sure, that's okay. Thanks, Vivian. I think we should have a goal, of let's get rid of as much PFAS as we can as soon as we can, right? That's why we're not saying repeal this, but let's make it workable and digestible and have some milestones. So, when we do an exemption on watercraft, I don't think that would mean, just forever and ever. It's until we are able to push back on our suppliers and say, you know, they're trying to phase out PFAS, and this has happened with other chemicals too. You know, what would seem more logical, perhaps from our industry standpoint, and we'd be willing to participate, is can we, you know, create some sort of like a task force in Maine to look at this. You know, we have a climate council, like could have a PFAS council and look at, you know, what can get removed. And to me, the risks of people who wear waterproof mascara, I said this in the legislative committee, I said, there are probably way more people in this state wearing waterproof mascara on a daily basis that contains PFAS right against their skin and body than there are people coming into contact with a head gasket on a marine engine on any daily or yearly basis, right? So, you know, managing those risks and, you know, sorry to say, you know, just go for the low hanging fruit. I mean, yeah, if we're spreading, and with fruit in mind, if we're spreading pesticides, herbicides, or any treatments on our farm fields and blueberry fields, you know, that's a concern because that's going to get into the drinking supply, or drinking water supply. So, you know, let's take what maybe most exposure or easiest to remove first, easiest to ban first, but keep that end goal in mind and look into each industry. Where can we get rid of PFAS?
That answer your question?
Yes, thank you so much.
Other questions?
Yes, actually, I had one other
Yeah.
one. Yes.
Yes.
I'm just wondering if there's any discussion of whether or not companies that would be considered for this position within an exempt industry to somehow, when they're adding in new products, instead of the ones that are already in use, so the components that are already in use, that as new ones are added, that they be tests be done on those, or PFAS be reported in those.
Well, so to answer, when you're developing products, you can understand that there are a lot of subcomponents that
Yep.
you are using subcontractors for. So the challenge is for a lot of main businesses is in assembling your product, you're relying on a global trade network. And ultimately, you are only responsible for the products that you are manufacturing yourself, not the ones that you are integrating. So ultimately, how does Maine wrest itself from an integrated global economy to remove this product when it's so integrated? So just giving a sense that there's a lot of unknown areas of where PFAS is in the product today. So so it's not as simple as developing a new product in Maine, because there are a lot of elements of that that are part of the global trade system.
So if an industry were to or as you negotiate this amendment, uh, if you were to achieve a carve out, an exemption for an industry, that industry would be, they're good. They're good from that point on. They don't have to look for any type of way to decrease PFAS in any of their products because they'd be exempt, is what you're saying. There's no looking for some way to step them down over time.
Right. The real aspect is we want to work with the Department of Environmental Protection on targeting the prohibition on the areas that are actually contributing to the pollution. We supply for U.S. destroyers in Bath. We apply F-22 engines, and those are not being disposed of in the Maine environment. but it still has the same application. And furthermore, when vehicles are being manufactured, they are under regulation from the Department of Transportation. And so there is some ability when the federal government creates standards that they could, if they think there are substitutes available, that they could apply additional restrictions to. So we do think that there are methods outside of the main state law that would continue to protect consumers, even if it were banned, even if it did not have a ban applied to it in the state of Maine. Does that make sense?
Yep, thanks.
Patrick, I wanted to ask you, Vivian Lee again, what is the status of any amendment that's pending in this session, or are you looking at something to be voted on next session?
This has to happen this session.
Has something been proposed yet, Patrick? I'm sorry, is there something proposed?
No, we are hopeful that the the Environment and Natural Resources Committee will be reviewing proposals in the coming weeks. And one reason why we're taking this media briefing on is we want to make sure that people understand that when we are looking to revise this law, that it is attempting to improve it, and that there is an economic cost to the way that the current statute is written. And I've been reading all your papers, and this is an absolute crisis for a number of farms. But the contamination of those farms was through the sludge disposal that is prohibited today. That is not the statute we're talking about. The statute we're talking about is requiring an unworkable notification by January 1 of next year, or you cannot sell your product in the state of Maine. That is a serious threat to all Maine businesses. And then secondly, to try to learn from how other states have adopted PFAS and look at where is the risk, where is the contamination, and target our laws at in the manner that would most provide the benefits to the Maine environment. Stacy, did you want to jump in?
Yeah, I was just going to add something when you were talking about, going into effect next year and the sale of our products. Something that came up, like we really appreciated that the legislature did one modification on the legislation earlier this year, and rolling back, and just it's only going to be applicable at this point for employers with 25 or more employees, I believe is the statute at the moment. So, that helped our small businesses, but it doesn't make it any easier on the larger ones. And one thing that came up with our boat builders is, okay, so we do have dealers in Maine. Small dealers might be 1 to 4 employees in a dealership who sell vessels that are imported from Europe. And perhaps that European builder has 100 employees or more. I don't know. But are they then exempt as just a small dealership from the reporting requirement? And then all of a sudden our vessels built in Maine are less competitive against those imported because they're just being sold by a small employer. So it doesn't, and what could happen, like, we have all these unintended consequences when we put out legislation with good intentions, but there's the unintended consequences. And then likewise, the boat builders, there's nothing to stop someone from buying a boat outside of Maine that has any PFAS in it, maybe a little PFAS, maybe a lot, I don't know. But there's nothing to stop them from buying a vessel outside of Maine and then using it here. So it undermines our business competitiveness in the state. And And likewise, maybe our builders would just no longer sell in this state. They would just go outside of the state and sell their products there, which is then silly because there's economic impact from that. So, we just have to step back and slow down on some of this and see what is truly practical, even though there's very good intentions behind the statute.
Jeff, anything you want to add?
No.
Yeah, I think, we do think this is a moment to reflect on other states' laws. We were one of the first movers, and we can be thoughtful. We can reduce PFAS in a way that improves our drinking water, our groundwater, and also protects these key main industries. And it needs to be an assessment of risk, of on what products are actually going to get into our environment. But it makes no sense to apply medical equipment in the same way that we think about consumer products or industrial sludge. But that's the way that the current Maine statute works.
Patrick, if you don't mind, can you tell me the state you're looking at? Maine kind of leads the country in a lot of our bills and laws we pass. What state are you looking at who's facing this similar issue that has been able to kind of met out a proposal that works with businesses or is going to be helpful?
Yep, California has passed legislation. There's been some legislation passed in Minnesota. There are only a handful of states that have done it. But I have to say that when I'm talking to companies that have business throughout the country and through colleagues in other states, right now they're offering Maine as a cautionary tale that there is a balance that needs to be established in PFAS regulatory structures, and Maine is an outlier. And the other states are not pursuing this complete ban, irrespective of the type of product and the risk to consumers.
And Patrick, if I could add on to that, it is also an international effort. It is a global supply chain, and what happens in other countries impacts the activities all over the world. The EU is also aggressively looking at PFAS, rules, to limit the usage and to ultimately with the goal of banning PFAS, but really focused on thinking about it in a thoughtful way, making sure that critical products that are necessary for the operation or for the health and safety and well-being of all of us remain on the market, while also focusing on trying to come up with alternatives. But this is absolutely kind of an international effort. It's not just Maine, it's not just the states, it's not just the EPA. It is also the EU, and it's something that we all need to work on together. Whereas, right now, Maine's the existing law is, deviates significantly from those international standards and makes it much more difficult for us here in Maine to comply with when we're working in an international community.
Yeah. And I'll just conclude by saying we are encouraged that the legislature can be thoughtful on this topic, that we can continue to reduce and eliminate some products, especially those that other states have prohibited in their own state, that we can build on that. But this notification section is unworkable. We think that section should be stricken from the statute, and that we should have some protections from some key Maine industries that are critical to the Maine economy, but also have oversight from the federal government.
Can I ask one last question, if it's okay?
Sure.
Several people have mentioned the economic toll this bill could take on Maine's economy. Has the chamber or any other group quantified that impact? How much business we'd actually lose if we don't amend the notification law?
I'll just answer it this way, not identifying any main companies, but if this statute is not amended this session, there will be a complete rethinking of the long-term relationship with the state of Maine for some key employers.
Just kind of piggybacking on that one last time. So a question for Jeff. I mean, if this is not changed, what does that mean for IDEX? Would you have to move some manufacturing to other places? You know, how would it affect your company in particular?
You know, right now, IDEX, as I said before, we're really appreciative of the work that the governor and Commissioner Moisum and the committee has spent on this. They've all been very engaged in improving this law, and our focus really continues to be on working with them to fix it and make this a law that protects Maine's environment as well as allows us to deliver products that are important to the health and well-being of people.
You know, I'll just add they have brought substance to the discussion. They are being pragmatic and thoughtful in looking to find something that can work for Maine businesses, address PFAS, and ultimately have political support in the Maine legislature. So we are very thankful for their leadership in trying to address what we're raising with you all today.
Real quickly, Patrick, sorry, do you have a sponsor for that amendment that you discussed? Does anybody step forward to shepherd this through the committee?
So it's a little unclear on the exact next legislative steps. We, for those who might not have seen the last ENR hearing, there was a request for stakeholders to try to find common ground and then report back to the committee. So that's the current step. But there are holdover bills that could be a vehicle for amending the statute that would go to the committee for their consideration.
Is
I
this
wanted
the
to ask-
only, go ahead, Penelope, sorry, I stepped on you.
No, I'm sorry. I was just gonna ask a little more clarification from Jeff. Does that mean that you're not ruling it out as far as moving manufacturing, or can you that just feels like a big big elephant right there in the room. Like, can you go a little further?
No, I really am. I'm incredibly optimistic. I think that the governor's office has been working with us. Commissioner Moisum has been working with us, and right now we're focused on working with them to make sure that this is effective, and that's where our focus is absolutely on.
No internal discussions if this doesn't change what you do that you're willing to share with us right now?
Again, we're continuing to work with the governor and their office. That's really where our focus is.
Thanks.
Sure.
Patrick, just to clarify, you're looking for changes in the statute, correct? Not through, DEP. You're looking to make this change in the statute.
Correct.
Can you clarify that?
This will require an act by the legislature to amend Maine's existing PFAS statute.
How much of these discussions that, Jeff has talked about with the governor or Commissioner Loisum is assisting in that aspect?
Say that again?
We've been hearing a lot of talk about these discussions, and with the governor's staff, with Commissioner Loisum, how is that assisting in this effort to change the statute? Or is it at all?
It's been, I think I said it earlier, they have been substantive, thoughtful, and showing leadership to look at substantive changes that in hindsight should have just been a part of the PFAS statute to begin with, that make it more workable. And hindsight's always 2020. There was a lot of pressure on the legislature to do something, but we have some time now to reflect on other states' work, to reflect on what the unintended consequences might be, and refine this law to actually reduce it from the products that are contributing to PFAS pollution, but protect the industries where they're key parts of the Maine economy, but also are unlikely to be contributing to what we're actually trying to address.
Thank you.
And these
I need to
talks
run. Does anyone have a last question for me? Just checking in quickly. Sorry, I can't stay longer.
Thank you for being here and giving us your perspective, Stacy. We appreciate it.
Okay, you're welcome. Take care, everybody.
Thank you, Stacy.
any of these talks also extend to the 2030 ban? I know right now we're talking about the notification, but if you're all having all these stakeholder meetings and discussions, are you also
Yeah.
addressing the ban?
Yes, so let me, and I can, there are really three aspects that we're looking to achieve. One is with the ban, so there's a 2030 ban of PFAS in the state of Maine, and there are some existing exemptions. Packaging, for instance, is exempt in the statute. We are looking to add exemptions for the 2030 ban. That's when I talk about aviation and defense contracts. We are looking to add exemptions for those industries. We are also looking to prohibit products faster. So building on other states' work, what are some products that we can eliminate with PFAS because there are substitutes? It was mentioned about carpeting. We've looked at dental floss, for instance. There are readily available things that we can accelerate the elimination of PFAS. And then lastly, the notification, we do think that that section of the law should be stricken, as we do not think it's workable and does not provide any reduction in PFAS from circulation in our main economy. So does that make
Thank you.
sense?
Yeah, I was conflating the two. Thanks.
Well, thank you for the interest in this topic. It's sometimes it's harder to be thoughtful on this topic. It's more, we certainly think that it's more than a black and white issue, and Maine statute needs to reflect that and join what a lot of other countries are doing with a risk-based analysis and eliminating it from products that are contributing to PFAS pollution, but also protect the industries that there are no other substitutes and are key employers, but also produce products that are essential for our economy.
Great. Thanks for doing this, and thanks to Jeff and Chris and Stacy for sharing their perspectives.
Happy to do it.
Thank you.
Thank you as well from New Center, Maine. We appreciate it.
All.
Any follow-up questions, please let me know. I'm available all day to field those. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Thanks.